Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In, brought to you today by CTC Math. I am so grateful for CTC Math, not only for my own children's education, as if that isn't enough, but because they are what allows the OT is In podcast to be possible. You will hear more about them in the middle of the episode. Now, if you have ever found yourself wondering when it's time to seek help for your child's reading progress, or questioned whether difficulty with letter sounds is a passing phase or something more, this episode will help to bring some clarity. Today we're unpacking what foundational literacy looks like at home, especially in homeschool settings where parents are both teachers and advocates. You'll hear clear, practical ways to spot early signs of reading struggles and how these can sometimes be missed when day-to-day learning is so entwined with play and natural conversation. We're exploring how phonemic awareness really develops before letter symbols enter the picture, and why noticing gaps early can help to make a difference for later reading and spelling. Guys, this matters because homeschool parents have a unique vantage point. You know your child best, and you see the subtle shifts in their learning. But without built-in benchmarks or peer comparison, it can be tough to know what matters and when intervention could help. The reframing in this episode is all about giving you a simple, OT-informed lens for recognizing and responding to those signals, so your child can gain confidence and feel empowered to support them and you to support them. Now, be sure to stay tuned at the very end of this episode for a very exciting announcement. Now, let's jump in. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In. Today I'm here with Melanie Jeffrey, and we are going to talk about all things literacy, specifically when and how do we know when to search for help. But Melanie, before we get started on that, can you give us just a basic background of who are you and what makes you so interested in this topic?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be with you on the OT is In, the Homeschool OT podcast today. So I am a phonics fanatic and I am host of the Phonics Rules for Kids podcast. I am an experienced core literacy classroom teacher, formally trained in phonics instruction for kids ages 4 through 9, so typically kindergarten through grade 3. I have taught hundreds of children to read using phonics as the foundation. So I help moms confidently model simple phonics skills at home to teach their beginning readers in kindergarten through grade 2 and struggling readers in 3rd to 5th grade. And I believe that moms are fully capable of learning simple phonics skills that they can put on rinse and repeat to streamline phonics lessons at home, even when they're not trained as a teacher. So I am wife to Bill, mom to an 18, 19, and 20-year-old. Yes, my kids were born very close, and I was often asked in the grocery store if the youngest two were twins. I get excited when kids can quickly apply phonics concepts to read with greater fluency. So as a mom who shares your values, I want to help you teach your kiddo to become a strong, successful reader.
I love that. So you and I, we were just talking right before this. And so your kiddos now who are 18 through 20, were any of them struggling readers?
My kids did pretty well. When I was even like in pre-K, I would
Hmm.
go through letter sounds at home and basic letter sound worksheets, and we'd already be matching those CVC words, which
Yeah.
are the consonant, vowel, consonant word structure. Basic B spells B, C
Yeah.
spells K, and then the five short vowel sounds in the middle, A, I, ah. And because I was a teacher and I had that knowledge of phonics, it was a pretty simple transition beginning to reading and then helping my kids learn those simple to more complex phonics skills.
Love that. So, for those of us who are in the homeschool world, now, most of us are trained in our own kids, right? And we're trained in finding the best resources for our children, not necessarily knowing these very underlying facts or the science of reading. Before we really dive into red flags and all of that, can you tell me a little bit about why you choose Fit Phonics to start with? What is the reasoning for that?
The reasoning for that language or your child learning to read is based on language, and language acquisition is a very oral skill. There is a lot of listening involved, and it's all based on sounds and sound awareness initially. When you think about it, there are 44 sounds in
Yeah.
the English language. 44. We have 26 letters in the alphabet, but various combinations of those letters are represent all 44 of those sounds. Phonics is nothing new. It is simply
Yeah.
matching sounds to symbols. It's been reboxed in multiple packages, multiple ways, but it is how a child learns to read best. So we have that oral language acquisition, focusing on the sounds and the listening piece. And then we add the letters, the symbols. The fancy phonics term for that is graphemes. And
Hmm.
that is what your child will decode to be able to read. So that is the beginnings is oral. It's all in sound awareness.
Fascinating. Especially, we have podcasts in the past that have been on auditory processing. And so, as you're talking through this, and some of the families that I've worked with that really struggle with auditory processing, it seems like that may be one of the red flags of, wow, this could be a sign that you might be struggling even before this instruction would begin. What are some of
Yes, and
the
that
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I say, but yes, that is so true. That auditory processing or your child's struggle with being able to repeat back to you a sound. You say, S. Can they say, S? Can your child articulate individual sounds in the English language? And you'll know, Sarah, that tricky letter R, and maybe
Yeah.
that can be a tricky sound to actually enunciate for a
Mhm.
child. And I think there is a range of acquisition for being able to correctly articulate the sound, tricky one. Can your child repeat a word back to you? Can your child repeat a full sentence back to you? Another early sign that your child might be struggling with reading, even before formal instruction begins, is can they segment orally? This is just a listening and speaking activity. For example, you're in the car with your child and you're going to say three separate sounds. So, k, a, all right, kiddo, let's put those sounds together and let's say the word at cat. Great job. And let's try another example. The word bit. So I'm the mom, we're driving, we're going down the road. This is just an oral skill. This does not have to take 5 minutes. This can take 30 seconds. So my word is bit. I'm going to say those sounds separated apart from my child. B, it. All right, kiddo, put those sounds together. What's the
Yeah.
word? Bit, bit. Great job. And Sarah, where sometimes it gets tricky for kiddos and where parents might notice something, there's a gap, there's a struggle, is when you get to four sound words. For example, the word cats, C-A-T-S.
Yes.
I ask my child to chop those sounds apart in the word cat, C-A-T-S. And instead of going k, a, t, s, they change the order of the T and S, and they say cast. That's the
Right.
word cast. Those are two different words. So that might be an early warning sign that your child is struggling with phonemic awareness, which is the fancy phonics term for the basic awareness of sounds in the alphabet.
Now I'm picturing myself driving down the road, and obviously there's tons of things that are around me. I can see a tree go past, and I'm like, all right, tree, or and then go from there. But do they actually have to be real words, or can we just play sound this way? Could I do like boof, just like putting any random sounds together that wouldn't make a word?
Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that. We call those nonsense words in the world of phonics, and nonsense words can be a great predictor for your child's ability to manipulate sounds and work with sounds. So a nonsense word like biff, nuff,
Yeah,
trying to think of mun. Those are, hey, okay, kiddo, the word is
yeah.
mun. Chop it apart. Mm, uh, mun. And yes, yeah, remember, we're working with silly words today. Buff,
And I think that might
make
be
that.
fun when you're in the car and be like, who
Yes.
can make the silliest word?
And they're not so predictable, those words.
Yeah.
Your child doesn't have a frame of reference, so they really have to be listening very carefully. So nonsense words can be great sound awareness practice for the basic sounds in the alphabet.
Sweet. So if we're thinking through this in a developmental stage, right? So if this phonemic awareness itself is coming more at the beginning, where you're even saying before we're putting these to symbols, right? So what would a developmentally appropriate age range be for this type of thing before we're like, ooh, I'm probably seeing this as a struggle?
So developmentally appropriate age range for just those phonemic awareness drills where we're not adding paper to pencil yet. We're not expecting our child to form letters to match the sounds. So ages 3 and 4, and probably into age 5, ages 3 to 5, you can begin working with phonemic awareness, those sound activities with your child. And if you notice that consistently your child is struggling to articulate a sound properly, then it might be time to get some help into that sound because it's sounds that are the building blocks of words that we say, and words are the building blocks of sentences. So if your
Yeah.
child is struggling to correctly articulate those basic sound chunks, then it may be time to look to someone like yourself, Sarah, occupational therapist, and get some specific strategies in forming sounds. I'm a phonics teacher. I can lead your child. I can model the phonics skills
Yeah.
for your child. I can have them practice and review. But occupational therapists, you guys are stellar at actually giving parents coaching on how to help the child articulate a certain sound that they might be missing or struggling with.
I am thinking specifically for I have two kiddos. One of them that two kiddos that kind of struggled with this type of thing. My first one was primarily because of the auditory processing. He ended up with four sets of tubes, and the ENT, when we were talking at the end of his third surgery, he said the fluid in his ears were so thick it was like he was hearing me like the Charlie Brown doctor, wah, 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 right? And that affected him. Now we are still even seeing him at age 14, where now that he's trying to learn Spanish, we're actually recognizing how he what still is not hearing every single syllable because of this at the beginning. We're working now backwards because it wasn't something that I necessarily noticed once he started reading. Oddly enough, he does listen to his books at 2.0 speed, which seems to be like, what on earth? That doesn't make any sense, right? I see your face like,
That's
huh?
fast. Yes,
Yeah,
that's fast. Yeah.
because he's used to hearing only parts of the syllables rather than the whole thing. And so he needs that to help hold his attention. But it is a fascinating piece that we're actually trying to think back on right now. The only reason I'm saying that is because if we can get in there early, I don't think he would be having some of these struggles that we've got right now. I didn't necessarily equate the two until I'm watching him at this point in time because we learned to read. It was a slower process, but we did learn to read. Second kiddo really did struggle with those R sounds. And now, as he's learning to spell, he hearing the difference between R and and ear, though that is really affecting him. So again, if we had worked at a different pace, even at the beginning with some of these speech sounds, would have been really helpful. So as I'm telling this story, I'm thinking me as a homeschool parent, and you guys, you recognize I am an OT, so theoretically, knowing this knowledge at the beginning, although I do think that speech therapists are the person to go to more for those speech and articulation sounds. But we are uniquely positioned to see these patterns, right? So homeschooling can be really beneficial to that. What other strengths do you see that homeschooling could bring to some of these early identification within these struggles?
Certainly. So, homeschooling, you have a one-to-one relationship, learning relationship with your child, right? Often you're sitting right beside them. I'm sure there are families that have other children in the mix, but hopefully you've given them something they can work on independently that supports the learning while you focus on instruction with this child at this particular time. And moms, no one knows your child better than you do. So,
Right.
you if you think your child may be struggling with phonics skills sticking, for example, they can't seem to consistently recall that th spells mm, or
Right.
you notice they're working extra hard, like extra hard to read a simple word like this instead of saying cat. When you ask your daughter to sound it out, it comes out with exaggerated effort like this, cat. It might be time to see if something else is at play, such as a mild form of dyslexia to more complex sound processing disorder that may be present. But moms, you know your child best. So you have the advantage and you're going to know when something is off. You're going
Yeah.
to know if something, I think we just need to give this a little more time. I'm not concerned. Or I have been working on this skill with my child and they're having trouble recalling CH spells ch. They're missing, they're just putting S. They're not having the H or they're having difficulty articulating a sound. Then I think you're going to have that niggling
Yeah.
thought in the back of your mind that it might be time to seek some professional help.
Yeah. I love that. I really appreciate the viewpoint because it is true. We do know our children best, right? Simultaneously, a lot of times we don't have these specific benchmarks where we would say developmentally, this is what should be happening around this age, this is what should be going. And there is obviously this is a range, right? So
Mhm.
what indicators specifically? You've mentioned some of if you're hearing this or if you're seeing this within our kiddos, how do we know what is are there specific lists? Are there things that we should really be able that can help to guide us since we don't have other professionals really around us being like, this is what I know developmentally.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And this is where homeschool moms, you can rely on your phonics curriculum that you've chosen. There should be a scope and sequence in there. Those are big terms, scope and sequence. Those teachers throw those terms around, but all it is, what is your child going to learn and in what order? So the scope is what phonics skills are you teaching your child? If you're aiming for first grade phonics instruction at home, what are the skills we're going to work
Yeah.
through in this particular curriculum? And what is the order? Which skill do I teach first? And that should be just probably right at the front in the table of contents that can serve as a great guide for homeschool families. And moms, you are capable of doing a quick assessment. If you've
Yeah.
taught your child a phonics skill, just go ahead and do a very brief spelling quiz because spelling quizzes are just asking your child to apply that simple phonics skill that you've taught them. Can they apply it to spell a word with accuracy? That's all. I'm not asking my child to spell words they don't know. I'm
Mhm.
simply asking them. It's a quick check-in and it can literally be 3 words using that skill. If you've taught the CH digraph, ask them to spell the word chip, right? Ask them to spell the word much. Can they put that CH spells ch? Do they have that sound symbol relationship mastered? So that is a simple assessment or just check-in tool that moms and dads can use at home. And again, there should be a phonics table of contents, scope and sequence. Generally, what are the phonics skills that a child would learn in first grade?
Yeah, great. And I think too, for us, a lot of us are learning through play as well, right? The majority of our kiddos are learning more through play than they're learning within just our time for our curriculum. And so, even as you're saying that, there are things that I'm thinking with my younger son after we would do some of these, like reading specifically or phonics specific instruction. I remember a time where I put on all of our Connect Four chip pieces. I put like a CH, a TH, and an SH, right? And we would, every time we dropped a piece in, and we would say the sh or the ch or the th, sound. So I could
That's
really
fun.
tell. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It is fun. But we could really tell, all right, are you applying this here independent of itself within this game? But then also then how are we carrying that over into your day-to-day actual reading, some of the simple books that you're seeing and things like that. When and if that was a struggle of, okay, you knew it here on this in this game, or you knew it specifically when we were going through our curriculum, but you can't carry it over, that was some of those underlying reasons why I'd be like, huh, do I need some help here? This is
And that's
interestingly one of the same things that we're noticing even within handwriting, right? There are a lot of underlying skills that go along with handwriting, our vision, our core strength, our working memory. There's so much going on at the same time that sometimes we need to weed it out, but we also need to really be working on it all put together, right? So it's a simultaneous, like, how do I separate this? How do I work it all together? So much to think about as parents.
No, there sure is. And I like, Sarah, that you mentioned games and the role of games in reinforcing phonics instruction while building relationships, right? And
Yes.
homeschooling is all about relationships. So that is such a great idea. And learning through play, especially our pre-K and kindergarten learners, even grade one. In those sensory bins, throwing the ping pong balls in the sensory bin, label them with a digraph, like SH spells ch, CH
Yeah.
spells like you were saying, can be like a simple dice game, roll the dice and read the word that's in the circle with that
Love it.
number.
Mhm.
And phonics bump is the little bump game where they get to bump their partner off. If they roll the word after their partner, they can bump their partner's chip off and
Oh, that's
make a
fun.
stack of it.
I don't even know.
Yeah, just a little natural competition built in, just ups the ante. And that's a fun game
Yeah.
that parents can play with their child, or they can play with older siblings. Yes, games and fun does have a role in phonics reinforcement for sure.
When handwriting feels hard, it's often because the output demand is bigger than a child's readiness. And the same thing can happen in math. That's one reason that I love CTC Math for homeschool families. The instruction is clear, step by step, and mastery based, so kids can focus on understanding the math instead of fighting the format. Parents don't have to worry about gaps, and kids aren't rushed past skills before they're ready. From an occupational therapy perspective, that flexibility matters. You can adjust how your child writes, how they show their work, or how much they do in one sitting without losing the integrity of the lesson. So if you're looking for a math program that supports learning and your child's nervous system, you can learn more about CTC Math through the link in the show notes. Guys, there is a free trial and a special discount code, so be sure that you make the show notes your first stop. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to the OT is in. Now, Melanie and I have already mentioned some about curriculum, right? And I do want to go in a little bit deeper here just because sometimes we're working here and we're thinking, oh my goodness, the curriculum is messed up. Or sometimes we're thinking, oh my goodness, my child, there's this huge mix and mismatch. And what on earth do I do here? So let me just ask you the question. Sometimes our issue is not the child, but it is the curriculum. Sometimes it's vice versa. So, how do we really, what clues could we look at between the child and the program that's being used?
So first, is my child engaged in the curriculum? Is there any room for movement? Is there any room for some kind of
Oh, that makes
participation?
my OT heart so happy. Let's add in that movement. Yes.
And it doesn't have to be jumping up and down and jumping jacks. A simple active movement could be using a whiteboard, and the act of erasing those letters on a whiteboard is a form of movement. Could you put in a 30-second body break, hop on one foot for 30 seconds, go get a drink of water? Specifically related to phonics, you can add movement with your little chopping hands when you're chopping words apart. You can't see it. I guess you can see it here on YouTube. So for the word hot, right? You're going to get your little chopper hands, kiddo. Ah, and you're going to chop that word apart. So that keeps your kiddos engaged. I know sometimes the boys like to punch it out. Ah,
Uh, yeah.
sometimes the boys especially have fun with that. All the kiddos do. So just in using a little bit of movement during your phonics drills is helpful. Have your child stand for when you do the auditory drill when you're saying a sound and you're asking them to write the letter. Maybe your child prefers to stand. So get them up, get them to change position and have them participate. And I also say keep the pace quick. Phonics can be
Yes.
done in 17 minutes or less a day, I believe. When you're doing your word change, for example, when you're changing one sound in a word, let's start with the word sob. Change a sound in sob, spell cob. Change a
I love
sound,
that game.
change a
Yeah.
sound in cob, spell caught. Change a sound in caught, spell sought. And your child is constantly having to use her mind and apply phonics
Yeah.
skills, and he or she is writing on their board. It's very fast paced, and it is such great practice manipulating the letters and the sounds to read and spell. So those are a few tips that I've got to check for engagement. Is
Yeah.
your child actively able to participate in this phonics lesson, or is it you, the mom, talking and teaching?
So important. This is so much of what I talk about as an occupational therapist, especially we need that attention on our joint attention and being able to go back and forth. And oftentimes that really relies on how regulated we are sensory wise. And if we are also then able to use our executive functioning skills, which is exactly what you were mentioning with this, your quick changing, that's our flexible thinking and your problem solving within that, as well as your emotional regulation as we're going through. So you're talking all different parts of the brain. And I think that is so important for us as parents to recognize all that we're already doing when we are engaging our kiddos in these lessons.
Yes, for sure.
So, when do you feel like we should be using a more formal curriculum? So, we've talked a lot about it's just we're driving down the car or driving down the road and we're putting together these word sounds and whatever, and this is the basics and the understanding. But what about this more phonics based intervention? Like, when do you feel like that should be theoretically happening?
Yes, and I know that there are homeschool families that have different thoughts about when formal instruction should be started.
Mhm.
But as a teacher who knows what children are capable of at within a specific age range, I'm going to say when they're 5, you should probably begin very basic, very simple phonics instruction. Keep it short. But definitely when your child is 6, that would be typically first grade. You should be following a scope and sequence, going through that alphabetic principle, and that's where it's the one-to-one correspondence
Mhm.
between a letter name and a sound. S spells, A spells a, and then you get into your digraphs, which is just di meaning two,
Mhm.
graph meaning letter, two letters that make one sound. SH spells sh. So I know that in schools in JK or typically pre-K, those children are also exposed and involved in phonics instruction. Some kids are ready.
Mhm.
That's pretty early for others. So again, you as the parent, you know your child best. You
Yeah.
know how long they are able to sustain attention for at one time. You may need to break that simple instruction in phonics skills. You might need to break that into two separate stretches over the day, two separate
Right.
times. But I would say definitely by age 5, your child is typically ready to at least begin some formal training, and I think it helps parents. I think it helps you feel grounded when you know that you're following a scope and sequence. What am
Right.
I teaching my child? When am I teaching this skill? And just check a few things off the box. You don't have to do everything every single time, but it gives you a basic guideline. And if the goal is teaching your child to read using simple phonics skills, then you do need to start somewhere and following some sort of program.
And I love to hear this specifically when you're talking about curriculums. What are some keys to know if this is a good curriculum or if this is not a good curriculum? Is this something that we should be trying to follow? 'Cause I know there's a huge variety out there, and we as homeschool parents have the privilege, sometimes also the overwhelm, but we can seek through and search to find.
Part of my mission is to ditch that curriculum overwhelm for homeschool parents because phonics is not new. Phonics has been repackaged in so many different ways. And I think there are great phonics curriculums and great phonics programs out there for homeschool families to choose from. And some, as with anything else, some likely work better for parent and child than others. So
Mhm.
some key things to look for is the font size when they're
Yeah.
asking you to copy or print out something for your child. Is the font big enough for a young reader to be able to read and actively engage with the font? Is the program phonics based? Or is it based on your child memorizing a bunch of sight words and simply being expected to recall a bunch of sight words to read, so to speak? Is the program based on phonics, or is it based on the old cueing system? So look at the picture to figure out what the text is saying. Look at the first letter in that word and the picture to figure out what that word says. And the thing, Sarah, with pattern text is they seem simple in the beginning. I like
Mm-hmm.
to jump. I like to skip. I
Mm-hmm.
like to kick. Okay, yeah, we can probably look at the picture and figure out that word. But what happens when you use that pattern text? What happens when the pictures disappear? What
Yeah.
happens when you don't have the visual clues and you have the picture gives a lot of context? What happens when the pictures disappear? That's when we start to see children who are using the old cueing system curriculums to learn to read. That's when they really start to struggle. So I think of phonics instruction like a foundation. And for me,
Okay.
phonics is the foundation for reading.
Yeah.
If you have gaps, that's like each phonics skill is a brick in your
Mm-hmm.
foundation. If your child is missing a brick, they've got cracks in their
Yeah.
foundation phonics, and they're going to have cracks in their ability to read text and to code text on a page. So making sure that it is simple enough that you as a parent can understand and follow through, making sure that it is engaging for your child, and making sure that it is based on phonics.
Love that. Melanie, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your expertise, and especially ways that we as homeschool parents can be thinking and looking at our kiddos first thing when they're little. And then also as
Mhm.
we're thinking more formal reading and literacy and how all of this stuff plays together.
Yeah, so absolutely my pleasure to be here, Sarah. Thanks for having me today.
As we come to the end of this episode, I want to take a moment to reflect on why today's conversation matters for our everyday lives as homeschoolers. It's one thing to learn about phonics, early reading skills, and what red flags to watch for. It's another to feel confident bringing these insights into your actual routines with your real kids on those real homeschool days where nothing is going quite as planned. Understanding is certainly the first step, but the real transformation happens during implementation. Each family's journey is different, and turning knowledge into action often means troubleshooting, tweaking, and finding what works for your unique child in your context. That's where so many homeschool parents can benefit from hearing practical examples, asking questions, and learning alongside other families walking through similar things. And honestly, guys, this is why I am so excited to finally share something that I've been building behind the scenes for a few months now. It is called the OT is in Insiders. It's going to be just like having a cup of coffee with me, where we can hang out and have a conversation. It's going to be a monthly gathering space for homeschool parents who want to continue these conversations beyond the podcast. So each month, I will teach a short presentation that goes deeper into that month's podcast themes with an even bigger focus on practical application for homeschool life. And then we'll move into an open Q&A and a discussion together. So if today's episode has left you thinking, okay, but what does this actually look like in my house? Or how do I adjust this for my child? Well, that's exactly what the Insiders is going to be for. More than anything, I hope it becomes a place where homeschool parents can stop feeling so isolated. A place where you can ask questions, hear from other families navigating similar situations, and receive ongoing support while homeschooling children with learning differences or sensory needs, executive functioning challenges, and all the real-life pieces that come along with homeschooling. Now, no, this isn't going to be a big giant membership. We've had one of those before, but no, this is simply just a monthly conversation in a group setting. We are planning to officially open the OT is in Insiders in August, but you, the podcast listeners, are the very first to hear about it. So if you would like to learn more or join the wait list, you can visit homeschoolot.com/OT-is-insiders. Thank you so much for being here and for being a part of these conversations. And remember, homeschooling is not alone schooling because the OT is always in. Thanks for being here.